Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. I've been playing a ton of older games lately, which you probably already know if you're watching my channel. So I wanted to break the monotony a little bit and try out some new-ish games and feature them on the channel. I was very excited about Diablo 4 when it came out, but ultimately it was a very underwhelming experience for me, so I still have that aRPG itch. I always go back to Grim Dawn since that's my favorite aRPG ever, but I really wanted to try out something new. So here's a random list of relatively new aRPGs that I played recently, right after the sponsor of the video. This video is sponsored by Dreadhunter 6, the new game in Dreadhunter franchise since 2015. The anticipation for Dreadhunter 6 was worthwhile. It's a free-to-play mobile aRPG with a unique hero collector feature in a stunning fantasy style. The gameplay features a fast-paced hack-and-slash combat style with various builds and skills to utilize as you fight big bosses. It's absolutely free. Download it now by using the link in the description or scan the QR code if you're watching the video on your PC. Killing bosses in this game is not the end. For every boss you defeat, you can not only loot, ride and fly them, but also summon up to 3 of them to fight by your sides. You can make them follow you anywhere, perform combo skills and even shapeshift into them to harness the ultimate power. It's a very cool mechanic that I haven't seen before in this genre, and there are over 100 uniquely designed bosses to conquer. New classes and units are updated monthly, so the fun of utilizing them in battle is endless. Download the game now for free on both Android and iOS by using the link in the description or by scanning the QR code if you're watching on a PC. Get a special starter pack worth $50 using my link. You'll also get 10 summoning scrolls, 1 SSR Lieutenant, Demonic Wolf, and 1 accessory pack, and you can enter a lucky spin event for free to win great prizes like iPhone 15 Pro Max, PS5 and more. Number 5. Sands of Aura. Sands of Aura is an aRPG with Souls-like elements. This game has been in early access ever since the late 2021, and the full version is supposed to come out later this year. You might remember me covering this game a while ago when it first came out in early access. Well, I'm happy to say that the game improved a lot since then, even though it's still in early access, so it's obviously not feature complete. However, there is a very decent amount of content in the game now compared to the first time I tried it out. Most of the issues I personally had with the game have been completely fixed. So, what's this game all about? Well, the story is a bit confusing but kinda interesting and mysterious. You play as a remnant knight, the last protector of man. The world has been corrupted by the angry gods, creating a sea of desert everywhere. Most characters are voice acted, which wasn't the case before. The voice acting is surprisingly pretty good for the most part.
Well, you may not be the most striking in Starspire, but you're always reliable with the time. Good to see you, Knight-to-be.
The lack of water is obviously the biggest issue in this world, but on the bright side, you get to sail on sand. This is quite possibly the coolest feature of the game. The Sea of Sand is explorable with a boat, which you get shortly after you finish the prologue. You start the game by making your own character with some very light customization options. The human character models in this game look kinda weird, with unproportional body parts. I guess this is an artistic choice, but it doesn't look so good, to be honest. However, the art style in general is okay, and the game manages to create a distinctive atmosphere because of this. This is especially prominent once you start exploring the desert and visit different places on the map that you can see in the distance. This is very cool, especially the first time you discover a new zone. Before you get to do any of that, Sands of Aura immediately throws you into action. The game starts in a dungeon where you're going to try out the combat and get the feel of the gameplay in general. I liked the combat even the first time I tried this game out, but it's been drastically improved since then. This gameplay is similar to most aRPGs, but it has a bigger emphasis on the difficulty of each encounter, which is where those Souls-like features come into play. Even the regular enemies can easily kill you if you let your guard down. On the other side, it's pretty easy to mow down a bunch of regular enemies when you know what you're doing. I started the game as a dual-wielding character, but Sands of Aura is not a class-based RPG, you're not locked into a certain playstyle. Speaking of which, I have some mixed feelings for the progression system, but let's talk about how the combat feels first. There is a very decent sense of weight behind your attacks, and the controls are pretty responsive. I believe that one of my biggest critiques for the combat was floaty attacks and pretty bad sound effects. However, this has been drastically improved. There is a very decent sense of weight behind attacks, with much better sound effects in general. You get a couple of different melee attacks and a special attack which depends on the weapon type you're using. Your regular attacks will build up the special bar and allow you to use special move. These special attacks deal a lot of damage and they're usually great for clearing out a bunch of regular mobs at once. Dodging and blocking is very important, and there is a parry mechanic as well, which can help you a lot, even in boss fights. The controls are really snappy, so I didn't have problems to execute these mechanics. Another reason why the gameplay feels way more fluid now is the lack of stamina bar and the weapon cleanse mechanic. Yeah, the version I played before had a stamina bar and this annoying weapon mechanic, but they're completely gone now. There are no penalties for dodging or running, but the game is still challenging despite the lack of stamina, so I think it was a good decision to remove it. To add to that discussion, the boss fights are pretty good, at least those I fought so far. You will need to use almost everything you have, and the game will kick your ass if you're not prepared. Boss mechanics seem solid and fair, but I would have to fight a lot more bosses to tell you how I feel about this. Your muscle memory is not the only thing which is important in these fights. You can stumble upon some very hard enemies, which obviously mean you have to improve your character a little bit before trying to kill them. So you should go back on the boat and explore a different area and do some other quests. As always, I'm a huge fan of that design decision because it gives you a greater sense of progression, and it seems like the enemies have fixed levels instead of implementing a level scaling system, but I could be wrong. The progression could be a bit better, but it's not that bad, I guess. You'll get to loot a lot of runes that you can slot in your armor pieces, which give you different bonuses. There are spells you can find as well, and different weapons with unique moves that I mentioned before. I'm still pretty early in the game, and I'm trying to decide if I'm going to continue now or wait for the full version. I would advise you to wait for 1.0 version if you want to check this game out. Overall, I enjoyed the gameplay quite a bit, and I'm really excited to play the full version of the game. Number 4. Alaloth, Champions of the Four Kingdoms. Alaloth came out in early access a little bit over a year ago, but I never got a chance to try it out. We are still not sure about the full release of the game, so it's still in early access. The game is being described as if Baldur's Gate and Dark Souls had a baby. That's the official description of this game, which is very misleading if you ask me. While there is some truth to that statement, you're going to be very disappointed if you expect to experience such a strong mix of genres. To give the game some credit, Alaloth is indeed a mix of a couple of different genres, which ultimately turned out to be its biggest weakness. But let's start with something more positive. This game looks absolutely amazing. I think this is the perfect example why the artistic style is way more important than graphical fidelity. Every single thing you see on the screen is very pleasant for the eyes. From the UI, cutscenes, and just the whole game in general looks amazing. There is a great visual variety and unique things to see while exploring the map. The game has a lot of cities, each with their own unique visual style, which just makes me want to stop for a while and enjoy the scenery. Unfortunately, the exploration itself is very flawed in the game because Alaloth has a major identity crisis. The way you explore this world is very similar to Mount & Blade games, for example. You get this huge open world map that you can navigate however you like. The map definitely looks alive. You're going to see a bunch of NPCs traveling, attacking you, or just doing their own thing. Did I mention how great the game looks, by the way? Yeah, the map also looks bloody amazing. You can choose where to go and which locations to explore, but don't get too excited. Literally every single location I visited so far has only one, or in some cases 2 areas. And if that doesn't sound so bad, well, let me just show you what I mean.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
Yeah, pretty much all locations I got to explore so far are totally devoid of any level design. It's really weird. I compared the exploration to Mount & Blade, but those games have some randomly generated terrains for battles and handcrafted cities and villages for the most part. Alaloth tries to do something similar, but even the cities are very underwhelming. Like I said, they look really cool, but that's the only positive thing about the locations in general. Sometimes you'll find some NPCs that can give you some quests or a little cutscene here and there. Then we have fighting areas where you get to, you guessed it, fight some enemies. Those areas are not different at all, except the fact that you get to do some fighting. Even though the map can give you some RTS vibes, the game doesn't really have any proper strategy features. You begin the game by creating your character with some decent RPG customization options. Your main goal in the game is to kill Alaloth. There is a bunch of dialogue in this game and none of it is voice acted. I wouldn't have a big problem with that if every single NPC in the game didn't have walls of text. No, but seriously, they never stop talking. This is not even the problem with the story, it's mostly related to the poor presentation. Even if you have an amazing story, it will fall apart pretty fast if you overwhelm your players like this. Wow, it really sounds like I hate this game, but I don't, believe it or not. I'm just disappointed with the current state of early access. It feels very unfinished, which is not uncommon for early access titles, so that might change in the future. The combat in Alaloth actually managed to leave some very good first impressions. The tutorial does a good job at teaching you the fundamental mechanics, and I did like it for what it is. You have to dodge, block or parry attacks and be somewhat precise with your own attacks. There are light and heavy attacks which consume stamina, and you have to restock the healing potions by crafting or visiting a merchant. The fighting areas won't let you open your inventory for some stupid reason. And when you get in fights, the fighting mode stays on until you kill all enemies on the map. Again, some really weird design decisions. That's not a huge issue I guess, but it feels very gamey, for the lack of a better word. You can choose between a couple of different playstyles, and shortly after the beginning you get followers as well. They seem very useful in fights actually, especially when they cast unique spells. The progression system doesn't seem that bad, although I quit the game only after a couple of hours, so I can't claim that for sure. On the other side, the combat can feel very stiff sometimes. The main reason for that are the controls and some animations, but overall it's not bad. The dodge button is very responsive and reliable, which is really important for precision gameplay. Same goes for parry and block mechanics. I would be completely fine with the combat if other features of the game were not so underwhelming. I really don't find it fun to explore a bunch of different quote-unquote locations with zero level design and no continuity at all. I checked out some YouTube gameplay videos and it seems like some levels are a bit bigger and more interesting, but not drastically. Overall, I just got bored with this game very early on, and I think this idea just doesn't work that well. The idea for this game design seems very fun on paper, but not so much in practice, at least in this particular case. I might be a bit harsh because it's still in early access, but I think everything I said makes sense, to me at least. I will definitely try the game out when it's feature complete. Number 3. Svarog's Dream. Svarog's Dream is an upcoming open-world aRPG that I had a chance to try out. The official release date of this game is November 21st, but they were giving away beta keys for people who were interested to beta test the game. Naturally, I was too late for that, but the developer was kind enough to give me the key for playtesting because I was really interested to try it out. There is a lot to love about this game, and it has almost everything I personally want to see in an open-world aRPG. Almost. On the other side, some gameplay mechanics are not very good, which might be a determining factor for people who are searching for a fast-paced aRPG. To put it simply, this game ain't it. It's more like a chill open-world aRPG with some sandbox elements, rather than a fast-paced action RPG. First of all, Svarog's Dream has a pretty unique and underused setting. It's a Slavic mythology setting, and the story is based around all pagan gods. You as the player have a lot of choices to make during the main story, and this will also affect the gameplay. There is no character creation, but you get to choose between several pre-made characters before the game begins. I chose the one with the biggest strength stat, as usual. You begin the game as just a wisp, and you get to resurrect your character that died in a battle. The game completely opens up after that. You can follow the main quest or try to do your own thing. It's a completely open world game with a lot of freedom and some sandbox elements. Speaking about the story, I really enjoyed it so far. The main gist of the story is revolved around old pagan gods and the new Christianity gods. The dialogue is very, very simple. Pretty much all NPCs in the game answer with a single sentence, no matter what you ask them. There are some exceptions here and there, mostly for the main story quests, but the game never tries to waste your time. You can still find a decent amount of lore in the game from the bestiary menu and just by talking to specific NPCs. What has to be the best part about the story is the humor. This game is completely ridiculous in the best way possible. NPCs are usually very sarcastic and the quests are very fun to do because of this. For example, I was doing this quest called Shitty Business. There is someone shitting in front of this guy's house every night and he's going completely insane. You have to come at certain hour at night and find out who is responsible. I won't spoil anything, but even this seemingly simple quest is much deeper than expected. Another really interesting quest I stumbled upon required me to strip for a bunch of girls on the lake. Yeah, surely that's not a trap, right? I would like to talk more about similar quests, but I don't want to spoil them if you want to try this game out for yourself. Like I said, the main quest will have some major consequences, and I did enjoy the story so far quite a bit. The game doesn't have any voice acting, but I didn't have any issues with that, especially because of the simplistic dialogue. The open-ended nature of the gameplay is definitely the best part about it. You have a lot of freedom to explore this world, discover new NPCs and quests, do various RPG activities like crafting, cooking, sleeping, and so on. There are some light survival elements as well, but they're not tedious. For example, you will have to eat once in a while, but you can make this process automatic with the option in the menu. As long as you have the food in the inventory, you won't have to worry about it. There are a bunch of small, similar mechanics that will give you buffs or debuffs. For example, if you stick to the road while exploring, you will get a buff. Certain food items will give you unique buffs. Potions can change the weather conditions, and so on. It really seems like they managed to cram a lot of small, and I would say important RPG features. RPG features like the itemization and the progression are pretty good as well. Like I said, your decisions within the story will affect the gameplay as well. You have light and dark spells for every class, which will unlock or remain locked depending on the decisions you made in the story. I found the skills you can unlock with the fighter quite interesting to use, but my problem with the combat is on the fundamental level. It's very slow paced and it lacks the sense of weight behind attacks, the sound effects are pretty bad, and overall it's not very exciting to fight creatures in the game. I think the main problem is the speed of the combat in general, it's just very slow for no apparent reason. I did fight a couple of bosses that have unique mechanics, and that was definitely more fun compared to regular encounters. Another issue I have with the gameplay is the difficulty, or the lack of it. Svarog's Dream has some interesting features, like very dark nights, when creatures are more dangerous in general. But so far, I only died once, and even that could have been easily avoided. I think the game lacks challenge in general, or the fighter has some very overpowered spells. The slow gameplay also gives you a very generous amount of time to react to enemies, which is probably another reason for forgiving difficulty. On the bright side, the open world has some very nice features. You will frequently get these little updates about what's happening in the world, and you can usually do a quest related to the said event. I don't think I ever saw a similar feature in other aRPGs, it's very cool and it makes the world feel more alive. Speaking of which, most NPCs have a daily schedules they follow. It's not very deep, but again, it makes the world feel more alive, which is very appreciated. All of those features make Svarog's Dream very immersive and chill RPG to play, if you don't mind the slow combat. The last thing I want to mention is the UI. Some elements of the user interface are pretty cool, but some of them are very simplistic and not so pleasing for the eyes. I really don't like the letter font which the game is using, but we're starting to get into very small details. I will quite possibly make a full review about this game when it comes out, so stick around for that. Number 2, Dreadhunter. Dreadhunter is an upcoming shooter RPG that I got the chance to try out a couple of days ago. The official release date is October 18th on Steam and is going to be released in early access. I was offered a playtest key to check the game out and I completed it in just a couple of hours. I absolutely enjoyed every single minute of this game, so I'm really glad I can show you some footage and talk about it for a minute. Dreadhunter is being described as a mix of Doom and Diablo games, and I can definitely confirm that to be true. The Doom inspiration is very obvious, from some visual elements to actual gameplay mechanics. The Diablo comparison comes from the itemization in the game. You're going to collect a bunch of armors and weapon pieces and create your own unique builds. You will level up, increase some passive and active stats of your choice, and most importantly, kill a bunch of enemies in this very fast-paced isometric shooter. The game doesn't waste your time at all. There is a very little downtime between some light dialogue and actual missions. You get this hub area where you get to talk with a couple of different NPCs before you accept the next mission. The maps are also randomly generated each time you start a new mission. I really like the progression curve of this game because it doesn't exactly start off as a bullet hell game. I mean, the game is very fast from the very beginning, but you get enough time to get accustomed to how it works before it turns into bullet hell. What's bullet hell, you may ask? Well, check it out. I really like plasma rifles in the game, so I try to build my character to support this playstyle. Each piece of gear can give you some unique passive or active abilities like extra dash moves, more projectiles, faster projectiles, and so on. Like I said, I try to build my character around plasma rifles. And I got to the point where my PC started dropping frames because of the insane amount of particles on the screen, so I guess optimization could definitely be better. There are no options to change graphical settings in this version, so that will change, I guess. I expect to see some optimization patches before the early access begins to iron out those issues. Anyway, you get 3 different weapon types: automatic rifle, shotgun, and machine gun. Machine gun is the strongest weapon type, but you run out of ammo fast, so it's best to save it for elite or boss fights. Speaking of ammo, this is where the Doom inspiration kicks in because you have to kill enemies with a melee attack for them to drop ammo and health. You get this flashing animation, just like in Doom, which indicates that you should use the melee attack to finish them off. It's easy enough, but it quickly becomes pretty risky move in large-scale fights, especially against bosses. The movement is very smooth, so once you get the hang of the controls and aiming, this comes as a second nature to you. It's almost like a dance podium. You also get different melee weapons you can loot, which have different attack animations. I think the melee attack is a bit underwhelming compared to ranged weapons. It doesn't feel that impactful and beefy like rifles, which is to be expected because the main focus is on the range gameplay. However, the melee attack is not optional, it's absolutely necessary for this gameplay loop, so it should feel a little bit better at least. That's quite possibly my only notable complaint about the gameplay. Anyway, you always face a boss at the end of each map. These bosses were very enjoyable to fight, with a decent amount of challenge. It started off very easy, so I was kinda concerned about the difficulty curve, but it quickly picks up. The challenge is definitely there, and there is only one big boss fight at the end of the playtest version, to be more precise. This was a pretty good boss fight, although I'm not so sure about the hitboxes when you have to dash through the swipe attack. Maybe it's just my timing, but it didn't sit right with me because I'm pretty sure I got hit every time, no matter when I decided to dash through the attack. This will be something to pay attention to in future boss fights, but that's yet to be seen. Overall, this is a very fast-paced isometric shooter with aRPG progression on top of it. I'm looking forward to see what kind of builds you can make in future updates, because I think this will be the main appeal for me to keep coming back and replay the game. The playtest version doesn't have a lot of content, so I'm really looking forward for more content updates and eventually the full game. I'm not sure if the early access version will have the same amount of content, but if it does, just don't expect to play it more than a couple of hours before some content patches drop in future updates. Number 1. Achilles, Legends Untold. Achilles Legends Untold is yet another aRPG that released in early access in 2022. 28th of September is the official release of the game, so if you like what you're going to see here, that will be the best time to try it out. This is another game on the list that I tried out before, and I had a good amount of good and bad things to say about it. However, I'm really glad to say that this game drastically improved since the last time I tried it out. It feels way more polished, so it makes sense to push the full version of the game out. Anyway, Achilles has a nice Greek mythology setting where we play as, you guessed it, the legendary Achilles. I'm a huge fan of movie Troy and how Brad Pitt carried the role of Achilles.
Immortality! Take it! It's yours!
And it seems like the developers are fan of the movie as well, since you have the iconic jumping attack like in the movie. The game begins in the city of Troy, where Achilles and his myrmidons are trying to break in. You gotta like how only one guy is shouting from the crowd.
To Troy! Ah!
Conveniently, you get this small hole in the wall and break in by yourself. This whole thing is a tutorial, obviously, where you get to test out the combat mechanics. There are a couple of boss fights as well. You get to kill Hector and fight against Paris, who ends up killing you. Yeah, the guy with the title Helen's Lover just killed you. Amazing.
This cannot end like this.
It's an unwinnable fight that will push the story forward, and this is where the game actually begins. 10 years after this event, Achilles somehow gets resurrected and he's back in Greece. Things have changed quite drastically in the span of 10 years, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. That's essentially how the story starts, but you also have some decisions to make at certain points. I still didn't finish the game, so I don't know if these choices actually matter, but they don't seem that important. The dialogue is fully voice acted, although the voice acting is not that good, to be honest.
I don't recall ever stumbling upon them in these lands, and I have lived here for a very long time.
The game opens up quite a bit here. It's essentially an open world game with some restrictions. You can do some exploring, which is usually very rewarding, but there are some areas which are locked until you reach a certain point in the story. You will discover a lot of shrines, which serve as a respawn point, fast travel and leveling up. When you start doing the main quest, the game feels a bit more linear, but in a good way. The areas you're going to explore look very nice, even though the graphical fidelity is not amazing by today's standards. Some areas feel a bit generic, but for the most part, I did enjoy exploring this world. You have more than a few side activities you can do, some light puzzles here and there, which are not trying to waste your time, and they will reward you properly. Now, all of that wouldn't matter a lot if the combat is not good, right? I think the combat is pretty solid in general. Different weapon types will give you different moves in combat, and there is a nice progression system on top of it. You have a light and heavy attack, dodge, parry, and a couple of different abilities you can learn. The thing I didn't like that much is how the skill tree is presented. I mean, it looks cool, but it's very tedious to navigate, because it keeps rotating the camera, and it's just a bit confusing in general. I really hope they change this, or at least make it less tedious to navigate. The time you spent in the underworld allows you to use these dark skills as well. I mentioned before that some areas on the map are blocked. Well, you will manage to go through them by using one of these spells. You can also drain health on unaware enemies, and you get a chance to build your character around these dark spells. However, I played the game with a greater focus on weapons and the damage type I was using. As soon as I discovered the spin to win move, which is definitely a bit OP, I never looked back. It's very satisfying to mow down a bunch of skeletons at once with this move. Then I got my hands on two-handed swords. You can upgrade any weapon you like, as long as you have the materials, so you can stick with one weapon for a long time. The combat is stamina based, so you'll have to keep that in mind, but a bunch of nodes in the skill tree will increase the stamina quite a bit. To put it simply, I didn't find the stamina management tedious. There are different elemental effects you can find on weapons, and they have a scaling system with your attributes. You can easily die in this game even against regular enemies, so your positioning and timing is pretty important. So far, the game seems really balanced, and the bosses I got to fight were okay, nothing outstanding. The stun lock can be really annoying sometimes, and it was the main cause of my deaths in the game.
I'll beat you, bloody!
Once you get hit multiple times in a row, it can be hard to dodge and you can easily get stuck, which kinda sucks. The parry mechanic is not that reliable, or maybe I just couldn't get used to the timing. I'm usually pretty good with parry mechanics in games, but this one just didn't click with me, so I didn't use it a lot. There are still some small bugs with the combat here and there. For example, the game just doesn't want to register the weapon attack sometimes, even though it clearly connects with the enemy. This usually happens when the enemy is knocked down, but this also might be a deliberate design decision. As for the additional content, you will find these portals all over the map, where you have to survive a bunch of enemy waves and you get rewarded at the end. Some of the side activities on the map are subtle, but I found them really enjoyable. Overall, I really like this game, and I think I'm going to start a new game when the full version drops.
You can't tell me what to do, you mutt!
And those would be new 5 aRPGs that I recently played. Tell me which game looks the most interesting to you, and do you plan to try them out? I'll have some GOG affiliate links for some of these games, so feel free to use them. Speaking of supporting the channel, I just launched my personal store, where you can buy some interesting t-shirts and hoodies. Check out some cool designs in the theme of the channel, like this RPG Zone hoodie or Nameless Hero t-shirts. But you'll find a lot more if you follow the link in the description. I think that's a great way to get something back for supporting the channel. And of course, you can always become a Patreon or a YouTube member and get your name on the end credits of my videos. Many thanks to all of my current supporters, and I'll see you in the next one.